it's also an incremental activity where you really need that engagement with each vertical one by one and in different geographies to make the market happen. So it is a growth market. It is a sizable market. It's all relative depending on how you describe it. But as well, it's still a highly specialized market where you need to take steps to grow it segment by segment and use case by use case.
Hey, SpaceWatchers, this is Space Café Radio, your channel about trends, awesome events and interesting people in the space sector. The have to attend top-level space event 2024 in Paris is history now. And this podcast is a review of the World Space Business Week, together with Pacôme Révillon, the CEO of Novaspace. Novaspace is the organizer of this annual event that came in 2024 on its 27th edition. I'm Thorsten Kriening, publisher of SpaceWatch.Global. Lean back and enjoy this episode. Hey SpaceWatchers, and welcome back to another episode of our Space Café Radio. Today we have the great honor to have the CEO of Novaspace, Pacôme Révillon, in the studio. Pacôme, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thanks, and I am the one honored to be part of this cafe, Thorsten.
You're a returning guest in our show, so that's great. But let's talk business. The 27th episode of the World Space, formerly known as World Satellite Business Week, is in the book now. So the first under the new merger, Novaspace, and again, using space instead of satellite. Was it a success?
I believe it would be more to all the delegates and participants to tell, but from my angle at least, I believe it's been certainly a great week attended. A lot of energy brought by all the companies, the over 1,700 participants who were there through the week. And obviously from our angle was quite a special time indeed with first edition honors as part of the Novaspace group, and was a great pleasure to have our enlarged team being part of the summit.
I see. The Monday of the conference was overshadowed by the announcement of the new EU Commissioner for DG Defense, Andrius Kubilius, or the Commission again. Will be your expectations or to the new commissioners before we are coming then to the summit?
First, as Novaspace Group, we've certainly been supporting space programs run and led by the European Union over a number of years now. We would expect certainly the number of important decisions to make at the European level. A lot of the discussion in the last year has been about the IRIS² program, but beyond that, I think there are obviously important stakes in terms of competitiveness of the European industry, the future also of the Copernicus program, navigation and so forth, fast-changing space domains. So on the one side, a certain form of continuity expected in the ambitions from the Commission. But then as well, there's always change and adaptation to the general environment. So we'll be happy to see some of the new directions and to give support to those. And obviously, space is part of the global equation. So it comes together with the sovereignty, economic and other issues addressed by the Commission and the European Union agencies.
The least what we can say is interesting times here as well, and a lot of dynamics. But let's review the last week's event, and let's start with the summit of space finance. My short summary was, it was more or less a business as usual, fixed mobile defense. We see a decline in video. It's not very unexpected. Do you see any other trends?
I think one of the first trends was certainly about the transformation of space organization, whether that's completely visible or not, but many companies reorganizing internally, and certainly a lot of discussions, if not project of mergers and acquisitions, strategic partnerships. So following the Viasat Inmarsat and Eutelsat OneWeb of the past years, certainly this year is partly about the Intelsat and SES merger, but certainly there's been also some other discussions. So I believe at the end of the day, the high level of competitiveness, the need to invest, but also the issue of sovereignty, international cooperation, but also larger involvement and activities taking place in the Middle East have been topics among others for this year.
Very interesting panel. Beside this really big number of very interesting information that were shared at the conference was the banker, the investment panel. So, and my understanding was that the market or the space market has at the moment severe challenges. Would you like to share your views on that? Maybe a status on the space/finance market? You alluded a bit to the mergers and acquisitions.
I agree, firstly, and it's not just about space. I think when I also discuss discussed to some peers and CEOs being in the tech industry, I think the entire tech industry has been under some pressure in the last couple of years, either due to financing conditions at large or to the adaptation, normalization of the market. Coming to space, on the one side, and it's no question that Starlink SpaceX Group has had and will continue to have a major impact on the market, not even talking about other NGSO constellations in that space. At the same time, looking more at the startup and new companies' dynamics. Many of them now have been in business for approximately 5-7 years at least, not to say 10. So it's certainly also now a time where those companies have to meet their clients, develop their commercial market, guarantee or demonstrate their profitability, sustainability, etc. And obviously, as any extremely innovative industry, we also have that phase of, let's call it, normalization that may take place. So from that standpoint, yes, it's a challenging time for many space organizations. So you need at the same time to innovate, but certainly as well innovate on technology, but also look back at the economics and fundamentals of the business.
Nathan de Ruiter from your team made a very interesting comparison in his analysis, talking about Starlink as the iPhone and the Android ecosystem. What is your view on that? Will that ever work like an alliance against Starlink? Because we have the omnipresent Starlink constellation, not just in terms of satellites, just also in terms of services. And so do you see that all the others will come together?
Well, first, I would say other players are also competing together. So the fact there is certain reorganization, certain aspects in the industry certainly makes sense. The fact that all other companies would ally together seems unlikely to happen. But that being said, I think one item is that we're still in a complex world. So I don't believe this world is about a monopoly of some sort. So clearly there will be a question of a shift in certain market shares for certain players. What's then the right positioning in terms of technology, clients, regulation, sovereignty issues, specific applications, etc. This we'll have to see in the coming years. This being said, I think it's been discussed, but for the industry, strategic issues such as standardization of certain parts of the industry, how it integrates with, the broader ICT industry, how to simplify, standardize the user terminal, other aspects are quite fundamentals in order to get efficient, competitive solutions for the players that are not fully vertically integrated. So each model has its own strengths and may reach its limits someday, but for sure, in a more fragmented ecosystem, the one thing that can help becoming competitive is also a form of standardization where it can apply and simplification of the industry and interfaces between the technologies.
I think in the entire conference, there were a lot of talks about interoperability, standardization, or what is absolutely needed for the market as in every other market. But let's move now to the first edition of the SDSS, the
Space Defense and Security Summit.
Defense is subject for Nova Space. Is that something new in your portfolio, or have you been there before? And what is the business connect?
No, firstly, and yes, it's not necessarily the most visible in what we've been doing, but in practice through the various activities of the group in management and technology consulting, but also other activities. We've been supporting a number of different space programs over the years. Some of them really where we have our domestic operations, some of them as part of export programs between certain nations. But so we have had those activities for quite some years indeed. Certainly with Nova Space and our larger teams, groups and capabilities, we certainly reach a new critical size in our ability to give support for a number of the defense and security stakeholders. And certainly as well, there is interest in both the defense but also commercial community in exploring ways to work together. And I believe Nova Space, having really worked on the two sides of the equation, is also well positioned to be, let's say, a support, possibly both sides, to see how to leverage the respective capabilities and align to the requirement.
About budgets, we're talking, and you alluded this, or you presented this number. We're talking about big market here in the defense sector. It's a defense space sector. You came up with the number of $58.3 billion, but to be realistic, that just represents 2.6% of the entire defense spending. However, the entire spending in the space sector is a very steep increase over the last years. So that was very interesting. And I'm quite sure that you make your homework as best as possible for gathering these numbers. Even there's obviously a huge budget which is not declared that goes into this sector, as it is a very secretive one.
Yes, I believe first, I would agree with you that certainly those numbers may not capture some of the classified activities, what we can't fully compute. That being said, if you compare to other industry, if I was to look at the commercial telecom, I would say space represents 1% maybe of the total telecom market. So obviously in defense, space is only one item in defense spending across all the other military assets and capabilities. Also, it is an important and possibly even more critical ones in the coming years, even if there can be some cycles in government investment. Also reflects importance of space, importance of rapid response. Proliferation of drones in the theaters also requires navigation, communication, data collection capabilities, to just give one example. So there are clearly a number of factors supporting the need for investment in defense, not even talking about the actual operation in what is now a contested space domain. So to protect the assets, to manage them in orbit.
In that context, the French military, which was obviously very well represented at the event, announced a new project, an active space asset defense project. Would you like to give us some more background, and how will that impact the commercial market?
First, yes, I think you refer to the Tutatis programs that indeed the Ministry of Defense announced last year jointly with the industrial partners and the agencies that have supported the program. So this is really two sides. One is about detection and navigating assets into orbit to get the right intelligence. And second is indeed a demonstrator of the ability to take action, typically in this case in blinding and other satellites, thanks to a small satellite itself positioned into orbit, ability to understand, detect, and then act in response to a threat to tentatively national assets. I think it talks about two things, what we just mentioned about that notion of contested domain and anticipating that in the years to come, there will be a need to have such capabilities, either for pure deterrence purpose, because you will also need to demonstrate that you have the ability to react in case of aggressive actions on the assets you need to protect, and the ability, if things really happen, to react effectively in such situations. So I think it's the purpose of the demonstration, certainly. And as well, this is a project led by Ministry of Defense, but trying to leverage as well capabilities of both established and new industrial organizations active in the space domain.
Thanks for putting a light on that. One statement was, for me, very striking and maybe showed a new thinking from the agency. And that was Chris Whitehorn from the UK Space Agency mentioned everything in space is dual use, otherwise classified differently. Is that kind of openness, transparency, something we see in other agencies, space agencies as well? What is your view on that?
I think it's agreed by most of the parties. The truth is one object into orbit that can deliver capabilities over the years may embark certain technologies, may have some capabilities that can be used for really commercial or civilian or defense purposes. I mean, if you take a few years back, I think in Afghanistan and Iraq, maybe 80% of the total satellite communications were on commercial satellite systems for the US DoD. That being said, clearly in view of enlargement of space capabilities, space domain, space technologies, and depending on the mandates of space agencies, which can be extremely different from country to country. So some can also have a role to play in the, let's say, defense ecosystem. Some are really focusing on civilian aspects only. But the truth is that some technologies, platform, flight dynamics, space situational awareness capabilities, many other aspects of space assets are places where space agencies are taking a role in R&D, technology support, making things possible in space. And I think there the question is how certain of these technologies can be adapted to the military mission. So I think it's more a continuum, but where certainly either because of the diversity of capabilities to address or some budget optimization, there might be on a case by case a bit kind of a continuum between the role of space agencies and then the leverage that you can make for security and military operations.
That was the first edition of the defense event. So will we see another edition next year? Is it agreed already or still pending?
So I think in general, we were again very happy with the attendance, with over 400 delegates, with a number of nations represented at Ministry of Defense, Space Commands, armament agencies, and otherwise other government representatives. So in general, we're certainly looking at a next edition. As we usually do, we will certainly organize right now a review with the partners who've been supporting the event, including, as it was the case this year, the Ministry of Defense in France. And obviously, after that round of reviews from all participants and organizations that supported the event, we should make the decision more official. But we certainly look forward to organizing new editions of the summit.
Sounds great. The last but not the least of the 3 events was the Summit of Earth Observation Business. And that was started with, in my opinion, very absolute excellent presentation by Anne-Catherine. So she alluded about this market size, the $1.9 billion revenue, 67% governmental use, 46% data are coming from Airbus and Maxa, 45% North America market. Really, some facts were put together. Overall, we look at a $7 billion market by 2032. So, and that struck me, that number, because that comes together with this upcoming $1 trillion market. So is Earth observation really a market, significant market? And we are still in our bubble. We are not talking about telecom industry here.
Yeah, I think first, so it depends what you refer to. I think for that trillion space economy, more than exactly market for application, I think it covers even things that go certainly beyond the definition we apply here to remote sensing in terms of enabled activities and obviously a good part maybe in SATCOM or PNT terminals being sold, etc. So there are all flavors, let's say, of definitions on how compile the space economy. For us, observation numbers you refer to are really on the one side, the data sales, as we estimate, really the data delivered to clients by operators of Earth observation assets. And then a first level, or we try to be as close at a first, second level of value-added services where Earth observation represents a large part of the value created for the end users. So we have a pretty restrictive definition in those reports. So is it a market or is it a growing market? Yes, certainly it is. Have there been different expectations with regards to that market and how quickly it could grow is a fair question. Government certainly remains the anchor and their defense and intelligence, no question about it. So sovereignty issue is a primary segment today for any, I believe, Earth observation player. We still see more stakeholders from commercial domain, from energy, other verticals having interest. It remains a fact, and that's a challenge today on how quickly you can build scale and leverage. Getting into a vertical, starting working with a corporate still requires maybe a good couple of years or 3 years. So it's also an incremental activity where you really need that engagement with each vertical one by one and in different geographies to make the market happen. So it is a growth market. It is a sizable market. It's all relative depending on how you describe it. But as well, it's still a highly specialized market where you need to take steps to grow it segment by segment and then use case by use case.
If you would summarize the 3 events, what are your main takeaways in a nutshell? Is there anything what strike you this year?
I believe the first one is at the government level. We certainly see a shift in some of the priorities and organization of space activities. Talking about SDSS, it's no less than 15 countries that have already established a space command, and this in just the last 5 years. So they're still very much establishing their full operational capabilities. But as well, on the civilian side, you mentioned about the European Commission, ongoing change, but this could also apply at a number of national level. And also some countries are trying to step up right now in terms of their space activities. So then for the industry, with both the innovations that we've seen and with the competitive pressure, it's also a time of transformation, rationalization in the industry. So innovation will continue without a doubt, but I think we'll see more of that reorganization, transformation really taking shape in the next 2 to 3 years. Industry will keep going, but certainly it's also a time where we'll see a possibly an enlarging gap between successes and maybe, unfortunately, some failures in the industry. So we are right now at that time that may lead us to maybe a new normal within 3 or 5 years, if that ever happens. But clearly what we've been discussed over a few years out of the current innovation cycle is now becoming very concrete in terms of commercial capabilities and thinking of financial performance.
Thank you very much for your time for this review. It was a great pleasure to A, attend the conference last week, and B, to recap it now together with you. Good luck for the future. I'm quite sure we will see Novaspace in many other events, in your own events, obviously, and other events in the space sector in the next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Torsten. Looking forward to it. We'll certainly have our travel plan until the end of the year and already working on what would stand next for World Space Business Week and Space Defense and Security Summit. Thank you so much for welcoming me. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye. If you have further questions, reach out to us at radio@SpaceWatch.Global. If you like these or other episodes of Space Café Radio, leave us a rating on your preferred podcast platform. It is the currency of today. And if you want to stay on the pulse of the space industry, please visit our website at www.SpaceWatch.Global and subscribe to our newsletters. And of course, don't forget to become a Space Watcher. I'm Torsten Kriening, publisher at SpaceWatch.Global, your independent perspective on space.